staff salaries so that I can break those out into those buckets on table 2. Same thing with the benefits, 502. Well, 50201 are going to be benefits for, you know, whatever. 50101 would probably be, I would probably put that pastor's health benefits. 50102 would be pastor's other benefits, non-health benefits. And there again, you're putting those in the right accounts every single time you pay, and you don't have to add anything up at the end of the year. You know, operating expenses, 601, worship expenses. There again, when you start getting into the detail of your expenses, it depends on your church. What does your church want to know? Do you want to know what you're spending on your worship? Well, if you do, then you're probably going to want to break it out here. But smart code it so that you know what they are. What I tend to do is, if I'm going to be working with worship expenses, okay, I've got 602, I'll make 60200 an account that's just a placeholder. I don't ever charge anything to it. It's just 60200. And so I know that this is the header, and everything else then is going to be a sub-account for on worship expenses. So communion expenses are going to be a sub-account of 60200. Does that make sense? Okay, and so did I lose everybody on sub-accounts there? Do we know what we're talking about? Awesome. And so then you've got them grouped right together where you want them. And it's going to look that way on your balance sheet. Now, if you're going to break worship out from Christian Ed, well, those are both programs. So you know that you're going to have to add those two buckets together to put them in your year-end reporting. But you know, because of the way you built your chart of accounts, and you know what you've charged there, that they're program expenses. And you don't have to go back and revisit that decision check by check by check at the end of the year. You've dumped it in the right buckets to start with. Just realize as you're building this that you're going to have to report it at the end. So if you create an expense line that's utilities and you put every single thing in there, well, if you've got the pastor's utilities in there, you're going to have to add those up and move them over here in your year-end reporting, and you're going to have to put the rest of it over here, and la-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So be aware of that as you're building this. What am I going to do with this when it comes time to report? And build it so that it reports nicely. Mission expenses, I don't remember actually talking about. Well, okay, the benevolent giving that we talked about, all of that, Methodist and non-Methodist. Code all of those expenditures in missions. And again, smart code them so you know what they are. Okay, Quicken. We talked about that just a little bit a minute ago. Anyway, I meant to mention in your packet, with the account numbers, I gave you just kind of a sample. This is not something that I think you ought to go out and build because it's the perfect thing for everybody. It's just a sample. You know, use it for what it's worth. Quicken. You can get all different varieties of Quicken, ranging in price from $30 to $95. You know, you can't go wrong with $95. Most churches can afford to buy Quicken. And it will allow you to have more than one bank account, which most of you will probably have. It lets you categorize expenses and revenues, and so you can put them in buckets that way. Instead of having a chart of accounts, you've got categories. And so I would have a category for every single one of those lines that I'm going to report on at year end. And every time I write a check, I would put that category on there. Or every time I make a deposit, I'd make sure I categorize those so that I can get a report at the end of the year that's just going to give me the answers to this year-end reporting. I can remember the first year I had to do this. I was away from the office at a training event, so I was sitting on my bed in my hotel room going, what? You want to know what? So I was about a week and a half late that year, and I was not Lynn's favorite pastor. So anyway, year-end reporting is confusing. And when it's all mushed together, it's impossible to do. And as Krista was explaining, your apportionments are calculated entirely on what you put on that year-end reporting. And if you get it wrong, that's going to impact you.
We're going to try to help you.
Yeah.
We don't always catch it.
Yeah.
And not once the apportionment is figured,
Yeah, then we can't
done,
change
we
them.
submit it, there's no change in it. Now, the next year, we can try to go back and help fix those numbers, but once those are calculated, they're done.
Mhm.
So please pay attention. I mean, I make mistakes too, but this is really going to affect your church.
Yeah. Well, but we had gone along all year, and I had no clue this was even coming. I didn't know I was going to have to do it. And so it was really, really messy. As I said earlier, you can write checks out of it. You can get the check stock and just print checks out of it and not have to write them out by hand. That's nice. And then you can do electronic check reconciliations. If you've ever done those are really nice. I don't know whether you can download a file from the bank to Quicken. Can you? Okay.
You can. I don't do it, but I use Quicken at home. And it also, and I can't even tell you which version we have, which is really sad, but the version that we have, you can set up with the multiple accounts, you can set up liability accounts, that are negative balances on what you owe, and then when you make a payment, it transfers. So, I mean, it's not truly accrual accounting.
It's not double entry.
But you can do some, if you're talking about going from the kitchen counter with the tablet, you could, some of the smaller churches, I think it would be really
Okay.
helpful and a lot less intimidating than QuickBooks.
The thing that we run into is that usually the ones setting,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
usually the ones that are sitting at the kitchen table with the calculator and a pen and paper are not necessarily comfortable with computer programs. That's the only drawback to that. But if you can get somebody, I mean, really, it's just sad to say I'm getting a little old and I'm familiar with computers, so, more and more we're getting to that point where people are just going to know this stuff and be able to kind of intuitively find their way through it. But it's a nice, cheap little way to track stuff and get it in buckets so that you can do your year-end reporting. The reason I tried QuickBooks at home thinking, oh, I'm an accountant, I can do this. And I managed to have that so messed up, it wasn't even funny. Because I would start into it and think, no, I don't want to do that. And I would just get out of it. And I just recorded a check that I didn't mean. And so I'm thinking, what happened to all my money? Well, I wasn't really gone. It just looked gone. So, there's a certain learning curve with it. But it's a good little program for the money. And well, we'll get to that here in just a second. QuickBooks is a full data double entry system. It's easy to operate. It's easy to make corrections. We talked about all that.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
There's a lot of help available because lots of folks know how to use QuickBooks. Lots of small businesses do. The reporting capabilities are really good. Once you get just boilerplate stuff straight out of the box, the reporting is good. But you can go in and customize every single report that's out there and make it look like you need it to look. To add things to it, take things out of it that you don't want. It's really pretty good for the money. You can put a budget in there and you can do budget reports. You can do, let's say your church has a budget, an annual budget, and you want to know, we expect that our pledge revenue is going to come in really steady up until about the middle of May. And then everybody's going to be gone for the summer, and so it's going to go way down. And then in September, everybody's going to come back and it's going to bump. And in December, pledges are coming due, it's going to go way up. You can set your budget up to accommodate that. You can say, we expect to get this percentage of these pledges in these months so that you have something real to compare to. You can say, well, by the end of May, we expected to have 40% of our stuff collected, and we're only at 25. So we need to be figuring out what's going on there. Did we not get statements out in time? Blah, blah, blah. Or it's July and we're at 65% and we were only expecting 60, so we're running positive. You know, it just gives you an opportunity to manage your budget with realistic expectations. And QuickBooks will allow for that. The one thing that it does not do is do giving statements. However, if you set pledges up, if you're doing accrual accounting in QuickBooks, and you set these people up with pledges, then you can get reports, because they're going to wind up in the customer part of QuickBooks. And you can run reports that say what they've paid to date on their pledge. You can export that out into Excel, and then you can mail merge it right straight into a giving statement in Word. It takes some finesse, but it can be done, and it can be done really well. Once you get it set up, it runs really nice. And so, if, you know, there again, if you need help with that, feel free to call. You can get, QuickBooks is really, really pushing to online, their online system. And that, it just depends on your opinion, how you feel about doing cloud-based work. It has some really good advantages because you don't have to worry about backing up your servers and doing all of that, because that's all out in the cloud and it's not going to get lost. The one thing that I would caution you on if you decide to go cloud-based is to make sure you know whose data it is. We, at the conference office, we were using ADP as our payroll service provider. And we decided that we wanted to switch to what we felt was better for us. And so we had 30 days to get our data out of there, and then it was gone. So if I lose my backup of that data, too bad. ADP has already purged it, and even if they hadn't, they would not give it to me because I'm not their customer anymore. So just be aware. Ownership of that data is really important. How can you get it? If you get into a situation like that, and I don't know the answer to this, but if you do get into a situation like that where you run all your reports and back it up, well, what happens if you need to restore it and you don't have the software? You know, what format are the reports in, and so on and so forth. So just really explore that before you jump into that. But honestly, cloud-based work is really more common today, becoming more so all the time. You can really tell in the way they're presenting it on their website that they're wanting people to use the online version and they're wanting to get away from the desktop. It is still available. I don't know whether it always will be or not, but like I said, you can tell they're really pushing to get away from that. PowerChurch Plus. I looked at demos of both PowerChurch and Church Windows, and I have to say, my very biased opinion is that PowerChurch is by far the better church, or the better program, but that's my opinion. It's a Windows environment. We're used to Windows, and we're used to the tree over here on the side, and clicking on the tree, and the subcategories. We're used to looking at that. We're used to clicking on things across the top and having drop-down menus. So that's the environment that PowerChurch is in. So for me, it's really comfortable. It offers membership, contributions, accounting, events, and record keeping. All those different pieces all in one program, and they're all integrated, which is nice. In the membership, it will track your member addresses, all of your contact information. It tracks attendance, and it tracks contributions. So if you get into a situation like I was just mentioning with QuickBooks, where you've got somebody that pledged, well, you can tell what they did because they're in customers, and it's nice and neat and easy, and you can do a pledges receivable report and pledge payments report. It's easy. But for those folks that are, I mean, and you can still do it, it's just harder to do to me, identifying those people that have given and you know who they are, it's just a little harder to report on them. This keeps track of it by the member, the activity of the member. It's tracking it from that standpoint. It's dumping it into your accounting stuff, but it's still giving you all of that member information in one spot. So that's really nice.
I have a question about that. If one of the smaller churches and you don't have a network, and you have a treasurer who has a laptop at home keeping your books on QuickBooks, I mean, you'd have to be able to network.
You can do that through like Log Me In. I don't even have, I'm not tech savvy enough to be able to answer exactly, but
I don't know about Power Church. We use ACS, which is also a system basically like that. It's all on the cloud.
okay.
Everybody can just go in wherever you're at in the world and
Right.
do the work. So,
One thing that I didn't check on Power Church is whether or not it's cloud-based. Or if I checked on it, I don't remember. QuickBooks, if you buy the cloud-based, you can get to it anywhere. But if you pick Power Church and it can't be cloud-based, you can still use Log Me In to get into it. And you can log into the machine and work on your desktop at the church. The only downside to that is you can't be working on it while somebody's sitting in front of it working too. So you have to kind of coordinate. So, yes.
If I have QuickBooks, which I do, and wanted to go to Howard Church, so I get the software and I load it in the machine, will it draw the data I've already done, or do I need to do this at the beginning of the year? And do I have to manually input all my members' names and addresses?
I don't know. I know that QuickBooks has a function where you can export and import. Like I said, I'm not that tech savvy, so I've always asked somebody else to do it for me. But it can be done.
I am with somebody else at
Oh.
Howard Church, so it's like,
Okay.
I don't know if I want a new software program.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to manually load everything in.
I would guess that you can import stuff. You might have to pay Power Church to help you do that. I don't know.
I'm sure that they have a tech person. I'm
Yeah.
sure that's asked a lot.
Yeah, it has to be.
Well, yeah.
So I'm sure they have a tech person that can help you import it. I mean, I don't know.
I can't either, but with mine
this
on,
day and age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
with mine on,
I would guess that it's possible to do that, but I would not be able to do it. And so if you get into that and it falls apart, do not call me. I will be out that day.
These systems aren't $99 systems.
Oh, no.
The ones that come with, they use ACS. They probably had somebody come and help them on site do a database conversion.
It's thousands of dollars you're talking when you talk about going to a huge
Well, Power Church runs about $395.
to buy
Yeah.
or buy the month or buy the month.
No, that's
Not
to
to
buy
buy
it.
it.
That's to buy it.
I was gonna say, besides Log Me In, there's a program called Team Viewer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And although I didn't put it on the computers, I use it all the time to go into the church computer. And, you know, it works fine.
Is that
Okay.
Team Viewer?
Team Viewer.
Team viewer.
There are things like Log Me In out there, any number of them. So you just do a Google search and you'll find them.
I'm kind of concerned about the confidentiality too of members giving. And I mean, we keep track of that and give giving reports every year, but we don't want everybody in the church to have access to that.
Well, what you do is set them up with a security profile and you decide what they can see and what they can't. So it may very well be that 95% of the people don't even need to be able to get in the program, so they can't. It may be that you've got somebody that comes in and does something. Maybe they're the ones that keep track of the attendance. Well, that's all they can get to. They can't get to the rest of it. You can set that up completely. All right. And then, like I said earlier, you can enter the contributions through the member, and it will feed over into the accounting part. The accounting, and that's something else. I don't know whether we're even that'll even hit fertile ground, but if you do fund accounting, Power Church will manage fund accounting. So if you've got a restricted fund where all of your different restricted funds are and it's separate from your operating, this program will manage that better than QuickBooks does. Events, most of the churches, well, maybe, I don't know. The events portion of it will manage the room scheduling. It will allow lending of equipment or materials, so it's great for libraries and stuff. And it will sync with Google Calendar, so you can have some ability to be putting things on the calendar through it. Record keeping, you know, that would probably be really valuable in a big church. Haven't had that experience myself, but you can catalog your equipment, you can catalog your music and all the rest of that, and it's available to you out there. The initial cost is $395. It has a 90-day free tech support with the purchase. Then the annual updates and tech supports typically run about $150 a year. Church windows. I have never worked with this one, and I did a demo on it. I wasn't as impressed with it. It looks more like an Apple kind of program. It's much more graphic, much more visual. So you click on pictures instead of drop-down menus and a tree and so on and so forth. So Mac users will love it. It offers basically the same things as the other one does. What I found interesting about this is that it's denomination specific. Now, whether United Methodism is one of the ones that it's specific on, I don't know. But you know, the different churches have different issues, and so there are different versions of it available, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wasn't as impressed with it, but that's my opinion, and I should shush. The full version of it is $1,070, so it's a whole lot more money. Okay, and that is that. We'll spend just a minute here talking about if you want to do Excel. Oh, wait a minute. I need to go back and talk to you for a minute about QuickBooks. I skipped something. One of the things that I gave you, I think, was this microscopic thing right here. Okay. Now, I went through and I talked a lot about chart of accounts and how to set it up so that you've got things in buckets. Something else that you can do if you want to is get rid of some of those accounts, consolidate it down, and use classes. Do you use classes?
I do, not to this degree, but.
Okay. So let's say that you want one revenue line. You want only one account that says revenue, giving revenue, contributions, whatever you want to call it. You can create classes for pledge revenue, identified giver revenue, loose plate. And every time you do a receipt, you have to attach that class, and it's going to give you that information by class. Same thing with your utilities. If you're going to say, I want one utilities line, but I want to be able to say this is for the parsonage and this is for the church, you can create those classes. When you're all done, and now one of the things, well, I won't go there. At the end of the year, when you want to do your year-end reporting, you can run a profit and loss by class. And so that gives you the same information.
This is on Excel.
No, this is QuickBooks.
Okay.
And so using classes on QuickBooks gives you a whole bunch of functionality. Be careful with it, because anything that you create a class for is going to be here. And if it really doesn't need to be in this format, then you probably don't want a class there. So you just kind of have to be careful with how you design your classes. But it's really nice, huh?
You still use your chart of accounts with your numbers, you can just assign them to classes.
Right. It just makes your chart of accounts kind of two-dimensional.
Yeah, it's smaller. You'll have fewer accounts because you'll have one contribution account on your chart of accounts, but you'll have 3 classes. So you'll use that and throw it into those classes.
Like my classes I use are general fund, building fund, and then preschool in our Hilltop program. So then I can very easily see.
Mm-hmm. And there again, that's the beauty of it. You can set your classes up in the way that your church needs to get the information. So for some of you, that may be what you're wanting to do is do classes that give you year-end reporting. She's got other needs that she's got, so she's not going to do that same method. But it's completely open for you to do that with if you want to do that. All right, and so at the end of the year, then this is what you get. Although I made this small so I could get it on one paper, but it'll give you all the revenue and all of the expenses by class. So if you did, say, you have a worship class, you'll know exactly what you spent on worship. You probably won't have any revenue for it, but so that's kind of the way. Yes, this is QuickBooks. And so that's another way to use QuickBooks. I tend to go more for the complicated chart of accounts simply because that's the environment I'm used to working in. But that's not best for everybody. I just met
You have subclasses too, to do the same thing, to be able to collapse everything into what is just worship, and then you can, if you want to break out the subs underneath it, then you can see what was supplies, what was
right.
altar flowers, what was. So you can either look at it consolidated or detailed.
Yep.
By your chart of accounts or by how you have your classes
Right.
set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just tend to go with the chart of accounts because that's the way I think. Maybe it shows my age. I don't know. The other thing that I handed you was an Excel spreadsheet, and all that is, again, is just it's just kind of a model. If you want to use Excel instead of an accounting package, if you'll take your checkbook every time you've written out checks and you'll record them in your spreadsheet, again, at the end of the year, you're going to have the same information. It's harder. I will send those out to everybody electronically if you're interested in them because I embedded the formulas in it. So it'll add up and do everything that you want it to do automatically. And I'll be happy to send that to you if you'd like to get it. So, but again, I mean, it's just showing things in the same groupings that we've been talking about all morning.
You'll have the embedded formulas for QuickBooks too?
No, not QuickBooks, for
Just
Excel.
for Excel.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I can provide that to you if you want to send it out. Okay, so now, Krista, you had said you have a slide that says the calculation for apportionments.
Go back to my, did I leave that in? Yeah. This is on our website, but you might have to dig to find it. And I'll send my PowerPoint out too, yeah, that's. Let's see. Yeah. Is this,
We don't have the slideshow started.
oh,
Yeah. I was looking through all those last night going, oh, that one makes me nauseous. I can't do that one.
oh, there it is.
We were joking with her, telling her she should have sound effects to go with the.
I said I didn't have much information, so I had to make it pretty. So that is those are the lines that we use for our apportionment calculations. And 56A is, you do enter that in the statistics, but we will take it out when we figure your apportionment.
And that's the preschool.
Yeah.
Or any sort of nursery,
Yes.
Yeah.
daycare program.
Yeah. And so your capital expenditures line that we spent so much time talking about is not even in the calculation. That's why you want it off of there. And that's why when you get to 56, you want to make sure you get 56A right because it's going to deduct it out of there. And then whatever's left is your total of expenses for the year. And we're going to put those in a great big spreadsheet along with every other church in the conference. And we're going to have a total. And whatever percentage of that total your expenses are is your decimal. And we take that decimal and multiply it against the annual conference budget for the year. And that's how they're calculated. It seems really complicated, but it isn't. And Excel is a godsend.
How do you figure the decimal?
We take those, after you've done this, we take your eligible expenses for your church and every other church in the conference, and we put that in a great big spreadsheet, and we get a total. That's the total expenses. Then we take yours and divide it by the total to get the percentage of the total that is yours, and that's the percentage of the budget that you're apportioned. Yes?
You may have been doing this wrong, our portion was maybe going up. So the assumption is the preschool expenses are included in 48 through 57, and you're subtracting that.
That's correct.
Ooh, somebody got more of that.
So you've been subtracting them out twice, right?
Yeah.
You are not the first.
Our preschool does all their own books, so it's not integrated with ours at all, but they've been reporting that amount on there.
Okay.
We have that problem at our church too, because, you know, for years and years and years, the Sunday school department keeps their own checking account. The youth group has their own checking account. There are just so many organizations. Some of the Sunday school classes have their own checking accounts, that they do things within their class, they give, you know, to certain, that we have no way of getting that information to report it.
Okay, so then you're,
Well, but it's been that way for years.
Yeah,
Often
but
it's
if it's
said-
under your federal tax ID number that they're operating, you are
I don't
accountable.
imagine they're operating underneath federal. I mean, they're just writing checks. And so, you know, if I went to all those Sunday school classes and said, okay, you guys gotta turn it all over to us, and if you want money, you have to come to us, and we'll write your checks or whatever,
They close the whole church down.
they would not be happy.
well, so, yeah, I mean, delegate that right straight to your pastor.
Right, right, now we're gonna need a pastor, and the pastor can break the DS and help have this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, the DS is extremely helpful when it comes to that kind of stuff, sitting down and explaining why it's not okay to do it that way. Your church is not the only one that does that.
No.
Our church is a little bit that way, but there's such a cooperative spirit that they just give the information and it's not even an issue. But I've seen other instances where there's separate money like that, and it's, you know, they don't want to share the information, they don't want to do any of it, and they can't do that. That's not okay.
Like ours, we have some of the same situations, but at the end of the year, they have to turn over all the books and we audit them.
Well, there you go.
And then it's incorporated.
Good.
in.
Perfect.
I mean, is that,
Perfect.
because we knew if we take it all away, they're not gonna do anything. This is their
Right.
word.
But it makes it very hard to get the information for this reporting. You know,
Well, we
like how
call for
much-
that, because I did, I called and I said, okay, what did you spend and all that, and at the end of the year, we audit the books.
And they should be getting audited every single year. If they're going to hold money separate like that, they should be audited every single year.
And then when we get the audit, which we have to turn in, what, first of May or something, each one of these is listed as in something in our church
Right,
with a name on it.
exactly.
To the district office, because the district office gets an audit
Yep.
from each church.
And it
Yep.
has all these little subcategories, which would be nice if it was all one, but.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can tell just from looking at the year-end reporting that the intent is for you to tell us what you're spending on curriculum and blah, 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 blah. And if they're not handing you that information, then your reporting's incomplete to begin with. And so it doesn't just throw your apportionments off, it throws everybody's off. Because you're underpaying, making somebody else pay more. I know, I do. Okay. That is my presentation. Other questions?
Off the subject, yes. Do you have anything to do with the annual audits that are supposed to be done on the churches?
I don't. Those are typically handed into your district office. They're not something that's required by the conference. It's required by your districts.
The funds balance report.
Yep. You know, with that report seems to cause all kinds of heartburn, but it really shouldn't, because all it is your beginning balance, which matches last year's ending balance, money that came in, the money that went out, and the balance at the end.
Well, I think the
Thank you.
hard part is that if you look at the GCFA's guidance on how to do the funds balance report, and you have more people that are more corporate on your church council, they want you to have your books audited by a CPA, which.
Yeah, and that's not
because
required.
We had two actual, professional auditors that are church members do our funds balance report last year, and they spent 110 hours collectively putting together binders this big to check off every list that's in that funds balance report, because it says, send off letters to the banks, send off test
yeah.
letters to the, thing. So what the conference says they want, and what in reality a church our size can afford, much less a church of a smaller size can afford, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And there's confusion there.
I can only say I've heard Nate speak to that, and his deal is don't go out and hire a CPA to do an
But
audit. You
give
don't
your-
need
but
it.
You give your church council that book, and they want everything in that book checked off. And to do that requires a $9,000 plus a year auditor. To even do an administrative report or an administrative audit to make sure you have separation of duties, to make sure you have correct cash handling procedures. So there's a disconnect there. And I've been in my role for quite a few years, and I have a lot of background in finance, and it's really frustrating for me to try to explain to people who are on corporate boards why, and our church board, why we don't really need that.
Well, I'll talk to Nate about that and see if
Our pastors talk
some of the wording can be changed.
Well, and then
Well, if
there
it's
might
coming
be,
from GCFA, that's the issue. We don't have control over it.
No, but our treasurer can speak to it.
Yes, our treasurer can send, maybe do a
Yeah.
going along with that.
Yeah.
Because you have somebody sign off on that funds balance report that says, I believe that what are these numbers that are presented here are accurate. But with that, they're gonna wanna say, I wanna see everything that you spent that was, $1,000 or more expenditure. I wanna see the receipts that go with that, because if I'm gonna sign my name to this, I wanna know that there's the correct controls in place to make sure that.
I've only lived through that cycle once so far at my church, and what we did was bring the whole finance committee together, and we had everybody that had a checkbook had them bring their records, and we sat together and did a review. Now, the difference is that we've got this much and you've got that much, and so that makes this completely different. But what we did was say, okay, we want to look at this check. And so the person would pull the check back up, and we would be able to see and just do a random test of the activity that was happening there.
Right.
And
That's what we did as well, but we
Yeah.
also sent off things to the banks to make sure that the beginning balance and the ending balance were what showed, and
yeah, and see, we did that through the bank statement. We
Right.
didn't send anything off to the bank.
I've
We
been
just
through
used the
7
bank
of
statement.
these, and the first 6 went very smoothly, very easily. But last year's, normally it took, and the pastors always pick somebody in the church, to do this. And they, for the first 6 years, always sat down with me, and I'm the only one who does any of the financial data for the whole church. And they could ask a question and I could provide the answer. Last year's group decided they didn't want to involve me. So,
Ah,
they decided they wanted me to get every check, and we do electronic bill pay. So I don't have checks. I have a bank statement, which was always good enough. So I called the bank and said, okay, I need a copy of every check for the entire year, and how much are you gonna charge me? $2.50 a check. So, I'm not what you call the shyest, quietest person in the world, but I went right to Pastor and said, are you really willing to spend spend $2.50 per check, and we've probably written, let's say 1,000 checks over the year, maybe. You wanna pay that for an audit that is just asking, how much money did you get? How much money did you spend? How much money do you got left? And he went, well, no. And I said, well, then you need to talk to Dean. And the normal process took 2 weeks where they met one time each week. Thank you, and they were done. That one took 2.5 months because they had a hidden agenda. And I knew they had a hidden agenda. And we lost several members because of their hidden agenda. And I was their hidden agenda. They were looking for something they couldn't find, but they kept looking. And so a lot depends on who you pick to do these audits.
It does.
Once a year, one year they decided to hire a CPA. And he came in and he said, "You've got to be kidding me! We have 70 members, okay, just to start with. And he went, awesome. You guys want me to do this?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "No, you don't need me." And so we went to the board and said, "Please."
Yeah.
But I mean, there needs to be some training on, I think, on these.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Lower the stress level.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Extremely, it puts me in a spot between having to go out and shop for a $9,000 CPA audit versus what our church council wants. And I've gone through intensive audits that were like that 110 twice in 18-month time frame. And here comes May again this year, and I'm like, I don't even have any friends or anybody to ask that has any accounting background that even wants to come near me during this time of the year, because I'll be like, hey, yeah, can you help with this audit?
Yeah. I was the treasurer for the Missouri United Methodist Church Foundation, not the Methodist Foundation, but the foundation at the Methodist Church there. And when I started, they had been having an audit done by a CPA firm, and they were spending between $7,000 and $10,000 a year on a $3 million enterprise that had, very little activity. And so what the board voted to do, now they may have undone that by now, but what they voted to do was to have an accounting firm do a review. Much cheaper, but you got the same kind of service. You still got the unrelated party, you still got the professional accountant, you just didn't pay the CPA firm for it. So that's something that you might consider.
So if you're a small church, which we're a little larger church than yours, but you think, get your finance committee together and just kind of do a random.
That we felt like that was
beginning
enough.
of the year, end of the year, what went in and came out, and
And it was very simple because our treasurer is so good, and we didn't ask her a question that she couldn't simply pull out the paperwork and show us what she had done and why.
the bank statement and say, what's this check for $600?
Yeah. We started off with, the beginning balance. Does our beginning balance match last year's ending balance, and was that substantiated by the bank statement or the bank reconciliation at least? And then we just randomly checked those things.
Too, because that's why ours wanted to go back and ask the bank themselves, because people can change the bank statements. And so, that may say that on your bank statement that you started out with that. You could get into different layers of fraud if you're just going with that. Because I could have a machine where I could highlight that and change my account balance, and so that's why our auditors, who are professional auditors, really wanted to talk to the bank and have somebody from the bank confirm that was indeed the balance. That's the kind of audit. I did 2 of those in 18 months, and I'm worn out.
I'm very sorry.
I'm not looking forward to
Well,
the
our
first
bank,
again.
our bank,
I
the
blame
banks
you.
don't do that way. Our bank, it gives us a list of all assets, and I can get it the first of the year, and I get it I'm only secretary, but I've been asked to work on the audit with 3 other people. And after a time or 2 of that, and then having to figure out where it was coming from and everything, you get a statement at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, and we have CDs and different things locked in there. It tells you exactly how much came in on them, how much was on some of them. It flips over into different funds. It tells us everything from the bank, and that's just a statement they give us every year.
But it should go to your audit team and not to you.
Well, I'm not treasurer.
yeah.
No, see, I'm the secretary,
It
so
shouldn't even go through the church. It needs to be.
it's
Well, I mean, and I think you're probably dealing with dollars in a realm that might make that necessary. Lots of these churches have $500 in the bank. And so, you know, and for the most part, you can get online anymore and look at your bank activity. And so what's the point in that, you know? But I mean, there's a materiality issue there, I think. And for you, the materiality is probably there. For my church, it's not. It would be a tremendous waste of money.
Yeah, those funds can be used for so much.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that you don't have to do it. So.
Go back a little bit, we're talking about like different groups that maintain their own books, but they use the church federal ID number. Boy Scouts. Now we have a review. We have a group have a CPA review the books, but like the Boy Scouts are not. We sponsor them. So to
They
speak,
should
but
be
they're-
separate.
It is separate, but they are using our ID. So I wonder if some of
How would they be using your ID?
Because Boy Scouts, I don't know, I had girls, so I know Girl Scouts are different, but a Boy Scout troop has to have a church sponsor. So our church is the troop's sponsor.
But they shouldn't be doing business under your ID.
They should have their own ID.
Girl Scouts do. Girl
Not
Scouts
Boy
have
Scouts.
ID,
Boy
but
Scouts
Boy
operate
Scouts
under
should
the
have-
churches.
Boy Scouts operate underneath the church IDs. They do.
That's
They do.
crazy.
Boy
I didn't
Scouts
know that.
require their troops to have a sponsor.
Yep.
And so they work under our ID, and we do review their books, but that's what I'm saying, to have a blanket statement, if they use a church tax ID statement, they need to be on this report, may not necessarily be correct, because I don't think, I mean, we wouldn't want the Boy Scouts it has nothing to do with the church.
Not on this report, but on the funds balance report.
Okay, maybe I'm getting that mixed up over which report we were
Yeah,
referencing.
on the funds balance report. We don't put the Boy Scouts on, we're trying to figure out how to do the Boy Scouts actually at our church too, because we've now started to make sure that all of their volunteers are safe sanctuary trained as well, because that is a liability for our church if something were to happen there and they were holding it at our church. So we've started to pull them into that process, but you know, as far as their books and numbers and things like that, I don't think that we got that figured out yet. But they do, I think they do use our federal tax ID.
I know ours do. And they're required.
I would hate
Boy
that.
Scouts requires it. Girl Scouts have their own tax ID, but Boy Scouts don't.
Brad, you had your hand up earlier. Did we get you answered?
Just back to what accounting packages everyone's using. I'm a Power Church user, so if anybody else wants to trade contact information on that, whether you're a current user or you
Awesome.
consider using it, I'd be happy to.
Okay, great.
And,
Power Church.
and do you use are you into the attendance portion of it?
We don't use, I came on this time last year, and at that point, they were beginning a transition to the church community builder for the membership and attendance side. So I really don't know the history. There's certainly a lot of membership information, but it's quite dated at this point. But as far as the fund accounting and the accounts receivable, those sorts of things, contributions module, I'm pretty familiar with that. So,
And you feel like it's working pretty well for you guys?
I like it. It seems very straightforward.
Well, thank you very much. Please feel free to call me. Thanks.